Decades ago, I started growing food in my front and backyard, and I realized that my mission in life is to inspire and empower others to grow their own nutrient-dense, healthy organic food. Because of this, a lot of people have come to me with their gardening questions over the years, and that got me thinking, what if we put together a community that would help budding gardeners blossom? So I finally made the idea a reality with my Urban Farm U member program. Each month, your membership includes 3 live online events, a monthly class, a chit-chat with an expert, and a monthly coaching session, plus access to the experts on our member page and a significant discount on our signature courses. I'm deeply committed to transforming our global food system, and I do this by empowering you to grow your own food. The Urban Farm membership program is a simple way to get going. Please join me in transforming your food system today. To learn more, go to urbanfarmmembership.org or text membership to 33444. That's urbanfarmmembership.org or text membership to 33444.
You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the Grow Your Own Food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today on the Urban Farm Podcast, we have Brandon Peterman of Sundog School of Natural Building to talk about his experience with natural building. Brandon grew up in Southern California and went to University of Southern California, Riverside. Always feeling a connection to nature, he has been living on homesteads in the woods for the past 4 years and has been actively doing natural building for the past 3 years. He has participated in building over 24 natural structures, from cottages to bread ovens, garden walls to covered benches and other homestead-based structures. His goal is to create a fully functioning working farm with a gardening education program and a year-round school. After his own apprenticeship, Brandon joined Kirk Mobert of the Sundog School of Natural Building, which is based on 50 acres in Gualala, California. The school offers classes on a rotating basis and apprenticeships in natural building. Welcome to the show today, Brandon.
Hey, thanks for having me, Greg.
Absolutely. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at now?
Sure. I grew up in the suburbs of Southern California, about 30 miles east of LA. And I always never quite felt at home in the suburbs. I was the kid who was always outside and running up to the local mountains and the woods to try to get away from it.
Yeah.
And when I graduated college, my plan was to go overseas and teach English. I had a really big passion for traveling. Unfortunately, a couple months before I graduated, my mother was diagnosed with dementia, and I had to put my life on hold to help take care of my family situation. Mm-hmm. Several years later, I was working at a museum and botanical gardens as a security guard in Southern California. And on my way to work, I was in a very bad car accident. A teenage girl texting on her phone blared through a red light and T-boned me at 50 miles an hour.
Wow.
So I came out of the accident okay, and I remember sitting on the curb looking at my car and thinking how quickly my life could have changed or been ended, and I had never done any of the things that I wanted to do.
Wow.
So at this time, we were transitioning to Arizona. My mother's medical bills got very expensive, and we had to sell our home there to move out here. And after that time, my father also acknowledged that I had given up quite a bit, and he encouraged me to go out and do what I wanted to do. And so the first step I took was to become an intern at Turtle Island Preserve in Boone, North Carolina. Some of you might be familiar with the property. It's run by Eustace Conway, pretty pragmatic American figure, really wonderful guy. Unfortunately, during my time there, it wasn't a very good fit for me. And I found myself there, and I didn't exactly know where to go next. The decision to go was pretty impulsive, and I lived my life on a relatively impulsive track.
Uh-huh.
And one of the other guys there had this book called The Hand Sculpted House, and that's by Ianto Evans and Leslie Jackson. Since the rediscovery of cob building, it's been the kind of go-to manual for introducing people into cob and natural building as a whole. And he had this book, and I saw the cover, and I was just entranced by the picture on the cover, and I was like, I got to borrow that book.
Uh-huh.
And I read through it in a day. I sat down for a whole day and blasted through the book, and I knew that's what I wanted to be doing. So I got online and started contacting schools, and Kirk offered me a full scholarship to the school. When I left Turtle Island Preserve, I had $60 to my name. It was the poorest I had ever been. And I had $60 in a car, and he was good enough to allow me to come out to his property several months before the course started. And I'd work traded on his property for the school.
Uh-huh.
And after it was all done, I ended up staying another 3 months and continued to work with him. And ever since then, I've been hooked. And that's how my journey started. And now I'm a co-instructor at the school with him.
Nice. So you were on the East Coast at the Turtle Island facility, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's in Boone, North Carolina. Beautiful, beautiful place. If you ever find yourself there, I highly recommend you check it out.
So, and you were there with a car and $60, and you had to get to the West Coast. How did you do that?
Yeah, so I came back to I went and did it on a credit card to get the gas to get back here,
Okay.
and then I worked at a horse stable shoveling horse doo-doo for about 4 months before I had saved up enough to ride me through the upcoming year.
Yeah.
And yeah, by any means necessary, right?
Yeah. You know what? That's a lesson some people don't ever get, is we just have to do whatever it takes in order to get to our dream. And it sounds like that's one of the things you did.
Yeah, and it's one thing I really appreciate in my parents. I got my first job. They forced me to get my first job when I was 13 years old,
Uh-huh.
and I've been working ever since. And, at the time when you're a kid, you hate it, but my work ethic has been the only thing that has made my lifestyle possible. And I'm very, very thankful for that lesson.
Wow. Yay. So natural building and cob building, let's talk about those. What are they?
So natural building is kind of a different thing for everybody. The way I describe it is using locally sourced materials, where whatever that may be, to construct human habitation that's safe and hopefully non-toxic. So if you're in a place like where I am now in Prescott and you have excellent clay, it's great for cob building. If you lived in a city where you had recycled materials from other buildings, in my opinion, that's natural building. Repurposing whatever materials you can to provide yourself with a reliable structure. Cob is a mix of clay-rich soil, sand, and straw mixed together with water. When we do our workshops, we mix by foot on a tarp by stomping all the materials together. There are other people who do very large construction projects who use bulldozers to mix their product.
Oh, wow.
And you're building large monolithic freeform walls. It's very similar to adobe. The only difference is that adobe is pressed into bricks and mortared together. And adobe has been a building technique that has been used in the American Southwest for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Cob itself, in one way or another, has existed for thousands of years. There are very, very old earthen buildings throughout the Middle East and Africa that are still standing after hundreds and hundreds of years. And it developed a small following in Europe about 300-400 years ago in parts of England and Wales. There's still cob houses there that exist today. Very, very beautiful, massive structures, 3-foot walls on them. Just
wow,
really, really incredible. And the technology was kind of rediscovered by Ianto Evans about 25 years ago. He grew up in a cob house in Wales, and was kind of mystified by the structure and the fact that he didn't see any of them. So all the rediscovery of it can really be attributed to him and his partner, Linda Smiley. And they've been on the forefront of bringing it back into popular, kind of popular culture. And it's becoming a little bit of a phenomena.
Yeah.
But there's several different kinds of buildings. One that's very gaining popularity out here is straw bale homes.
Right.
And that's a great system. It can also be mixed and integrated with cob to do a hybrid called bale cob.
Oh.
And there's tons of different kinds. You can do cordwood structures where you use cordwood for your wall construction installation with a clay mortar. You can do light straw, which is a process of getting a straw bale, fluffing it all up so it's all nice and loose, and you throw it out on a tarp, taking a material we make called clay slip, which is kind of a thin mud, and rolling the straw around in the tarp, and using traditional stick framing, which most people are familiar with conventional construction, by altering your stud system. You can put plywood forms against your wall and take that mud-coated straw, stuff it in between the forms of your wall, and immediately remove them. And you're basically making your wall a giant insulated panel. And that's what I've done for the home that I live in Northern California. I built a home on my buddy's property that's still in progress. And there's also heavy straw, which is basically the same thing, except it's coated and it has a lot more structural stability. It doesn't necessarily need the heavy amount of stick framing that the other would. And even if you're living in an area that's heavily forested, doing traditional timber framing or post and beam log cabin, that's also natural building. It's using the resources around you that are available and don't need to be trucked across mass distances and have all those hidden costs that go involved with a lot of modern construction.
Wow. So that's natural building, and there's a wide range. And it sounds to me, and you said this, I think twice. You said basically if you find it nearby.
Yeah, if you find it nearby and it's a resource, take advantage. For the foundations of our buildings in our area, we have in Northern California, we have really bad stone. It's shale and it breaks apart really easily and can't be used for foundations. So we go up to our county yard in the south end of Mendocino County, and they have urbanite there, busted up concrete that they let us take for free, and we repurpose and use for our foundations of our buildings. It's not the prettiest thing, but it's a way to recycle a material that would otherwise just sit and take up space and not be used. So huge advocates of getting as much as we can for free. I'm a big fan of dumpster diving. I love going and looking for through the trash for interesting things to put into buildings. So anything that can be repurposed and locally sourced, in my opinion, is natural
building. Cool. Well, then I've been doing natural building here at the Urban Farm for a long time. I have absolutely. On the back patio, I have what is it's repurposed pool edging. When you jump up and sit on the edge of a pool. A friend of mine was demoing his pool, and I said, "What are you doing with all that?" And they said they're hauling it to the dump. And I said, "Let's put it in my truck." And so it's seating on the back patio here at the Urban Farm. So I love that. So
yeah, absolutely. It goes back into permaculture. No waste. Use whatever you can.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've mentioned a couple of places you get materials from. Is there for clay and sand and those and straw that stuff's pretty much locally available, is it not?
Yeah, for the most part, we mine all our clay on the property. We have great building soil. We get our sand from a local quarry, and the closest we can source our straw from is a little farther north. They do a lot of rice growing up there, so we use rice straw.
Oh, nice.
But it's the closest we can get. It's still about a 3-hour drive from us, but it's a pretty decent compromise.
Yeah.
But the straw is not absolutely necessary. You can use other materials in your environment that provide tensile strength. That's the purpose of the straw, is to provide tensile strength.
Right. Say more about that tensile strength. What's that?
So when you're constructing a wall, your three materials have different qualities. The clay is the clay is your binder that holds everything together.
Mm-hmm.
Your sand is the compressive strength that gives strength to the wall and stabilizes it vertically. And the straw provides tensile strength, which helps it from pulling apart during the drying process and locking it all together.
Got it.
So there's lots of different things you can use for that. You could use any kind of long fiber, recycled blue jeans, local vines that are growing on your property, anything that can just provide that same function. Basically, it doesn't have to be straw. There's lots of other things, depending on your environment, that can be used. Here, I've made some adobe bricks by crushing up yucca stalk. Yucca stalk has great fiber in it.
Oh yes, of
and
course
it's very, very long. It's a little time consuming to separate it, but I wanted to make a homogeneous mix strictly from my property. I have a great mix of clay and sand on the property that I'm currently at in Prescott, and yeah, it works out great. It's just how much time do you want to invest? The straw is also just, for obvious sakes, convenient. And we can go to the store and pick it up rather than go through the forest and try to harvest what we need off the landscape. But it can be done, and if you have the motivation, highly encourage it to be done. Yeah. So that's basically the makeup of cob, and then water to just integrate and mix it all together.
Yeah. It sounds to me like there's a bit of a science behind this too.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, you really can't avoid soil sciences when you're coming into this process. Whenever you're going to build a structure, you need to test your soil to see what the qualities are and if it's good for cob. And for that, you need a fairly high clay content, which is great here. I was going through northern Idaho a couple months ago. I considered potentially purchasing property out there and went around and did several soil samples throughout 2 different counties.
Oh, wow.
And the average clay content of the soil, I'd say, is around 10%. It's fairly low, and it's very silty, sandy loam. The landscape is formed from old glacial activities. So there's really just not much clay in it. And I went to the extent of going to a quarry because I could obviously only test the surface soil. So I went to a quarry and was like, hey, at what depth are you guys hitting clay? And they kind of looked at me like, what clay? That's something I had never experienced, living in California and Arizona, is finding soils that didn't have adequate contents of clay. Yeah. So if I were to eventually settle in that area, I'd have to rethink my building process. I did the research, and straw bales there are $2 a bale, which is very, very affordable and locally grown. Yeah. I was shocked by the price. I think we pay about $12 a bale, but we're in a very little small town on the coast, so I'm not surprised about that. Yeah. But it would complicate things in the matter that even though I wouldn't have enough for cob, it's still not enough clay content to even do a proper clay plaster. So there would have to be a thought process going into that to kind of weigh the options of whether or not it would be worth it or even viable at all to do the kind of building that I want there. Yeah. So I'm currently looking around a little bit more and exploring my options.
Oh, cool. So how do building codes fit in all this?
Building codes are favorable towards some methods of natural building. Straw bale houses are permitted here in Arizona. They're permitted in California. But in the general sense, if an architect came to look at a cob building, I don't think they'd really understand a whole lot of what was going on in the building. Right. And it's not really acknowledged by the building codes. There are houses that have been permitted, and in some cases, the compromises they've had to make in order to get them permitted, I think, take away from the integrity of the building structurally and could potentially be problematic. So our attitude at the school is we don't really care if it's acknowledged by the building code or not. I think it's an inherent human right to be able to provide yourself with shelter. Yeah. I agree that, there's building codes for a reason. It's trying to ensure the safety of people who may acquire the property in the future. But for our purposes, we're out of school. We need to build in order to teach. And so my partner has basically decided that if we catch anything from building codes, then we'll just deal with it when the time comes. Yeah. All our buildings are very well documented photographically, so we do have evidence of how they were constructed. Yeah. And you can get away with some smaller structures. Kind of the federal law is that a structure under 200 feet that's not a primary residence can be constructed without a permit.
Right.
But some counties try to circumvent that. In Northern California, where we're at, it's 120 square feet of internal space.
Oh.
And that changed from 120 square feet period because people were doing straw bale structures and they're very wide. And so there was a compromise made to make it internal space so that you could account for, the size of the bales and not take away from the function of your building.
Right.
So, you need to check with your local codes to see where you're at on that. Mm-hmm. But it's something that I'm particularly not too concerned with. And if I developed a property in the future, I don't think I would really worry about permitting. I do what I was going to do and worry about the repercussions later personally.
Yeah. Do it and then don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, I think we call that.
Correct, yeah.
So how do these structures survive the weather?
They do excellent. The biggest enemy of cob in particular, we focus mostly on cob because it's really the most popular. Uh-huh. And if we want to teach workshops and get people interested, then we have to teach what people are interested in, and that's primarily cob. So focusing on that, the biggest enemy of cob is water. You don't want to build in a floodplain. You don't want water seeping into the walls of your building because it can make it structurally unstable. So the general consensus is that with a good foundation and a good roof, you're totally okay. And they've done studies on some of the surviving buildings in England, and they have very wet weather, driving rains.
Right.
And they found that cob loses about an inch of material every century.
Oh my God.
So, with a kind of very bare minimum 1 foot wall with little to no work would survive a very long time as long as the roof and the foundation held.
Right.
And if you're going out there and reapplying plasters every once in a while just to make your house look pretty, you're probably gaining width to your wall just by adding those plasters with the lack of deterioration that's happening. So. Yeah. We're building in a very wet place. We're on the coast in Northern California, and the average rainfall there is about 55 to 60 inches.
Wow.
We've been in a drought. We've been in a drought for the past 4 years. We're kind of up to par with rain this year, but we've had houses out there and they're doing fine. And in a lot of ways, we're experimenting as well. A lot of the buildings in the Middle East and Africa, especially in Africa where they do get monsoon weather, there are basically cob structures that are built right on the ground. And they do certain things to ensure that the walls don't receive too much damage with proper grading the surrounding landscape away from the house to help with drainage. And they'll build a kind of sacrificial toe on the bottom of their wall. It'll flare out. So any surface water that comes into contact could potentially wash that away, but it won't affect the main structure of their wall, and they'll go back and rebuild that toe as necessary. And so we've decided that we wanted to do some experimentation with that in our weather. The reason the foundation thing kind of came to be was when Eonto Evans and Michael Smith were building one of their first structures out in Oregon. They decided to build on this nice little rocky outcrop. When the rains came, the groundwater level rose to the surface, and it flooded out their floor. So they decided that, hey, we need to have foundations on these buildings. And it's been kind of the unwritten law ever since that foundations must be included in your building. But in order for the technology to progress, both my business partner and I are very avid in testing what's been considered the norms and finding if they, number one, are necessary all the time under all circumstances. And, what's problematic? We may lose a building one day, but we'll get to see the process and learn from that process. Yeah. I think it's always important to be testing the abilities of the material that you're using. If you don't test and experiment and do things new and differently, you'll never learn anything new. Yeah. And the last thing we want to do in particularly something like this is to become stagnant and have a very ironclad way of doing things, and that's the only way, because these are owner-built structures. If we want to be able to circumvent issues of maybe having poor rock in the area, or other things like that. What if we didn't have that urbanite? Then what would we do? So we're always experimenting and trying new things just to see how viable they can be.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So on your list of questions that I have for you, you talk about rocket stoves. Can you tell us a little bit about them and when someone would want to use them, and really, what are they?
Rocket stoves are really interesting. It's kind of my business partner's specialty. The technology has been going through a discovery for about the past 10 years, and my partner Kirk was one of kind of the first and primary experimenters in the United States. And he actually started a really great forum. If you have interest in rocket stoves, it's www.donkey, like the animal, 32.proboards.com. And it's an international forum. There's people chiming in from all over the globe. Their experiments, from the average home builder to people who are getting really scientific with it and doing some incredible things. Particularly Peter Vandenberg. I think he's Danish. He might be from Denmark or maybe from Belgium. I'm not sure, but he's made some very, very incredible discoveries with the technology. But what a rocket stove is it's a modern mass heater. So the way we heat air today or the way we heat our homes today is by heating the air, which is one of the most inefficient and expensive methods of heating a home. It's far superior to heat a mass that once the fire is gone, it still retains heat and can radiate it even after the system is no longer in use. So cob is very dense, excellent thermal mass. So you basically have a very strange looking fire device. It's really hard to describe. You'd have to go online to really look at it to see what I'm talking about. But it's an alternative to potbelly stoves. You can rig up your rocket stove to run through a mass, like I said. You can heat a bench. You can heat a floor. You can heat a bed by running your stovepipe through it. And this is a very old technology as well. In China, they used to have kangs, which were giant masonry heaters that would heat bed systems. And in the Romans, they had the hypocaust. And it's been around for a very, very long time, but the technology has been lost a little bit. But it has great advantages. Wood stoves put off a lot of smoke. And whenever you see smoke, that's all unburned fuel. That the fire's not roaring hot enough to burn off the chemicals, those flammable chemicals in the wood. So you have smoke and you have air pollution. The rocket stoves, at the kind of apex of their heat in the system, can get very, very hot. They can get over 1,500 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
So by the time you've run the firewood through your system, if you've done it right, the only thing that's leaving your stovepipe is air vapor, is steam. And the stovepipe is actually cool enough that you can go out and touch your stovepipe. It doesn't go really over, 100 degrees.
Right. So really what rocket stoves burn so hot they burn everything.
Right. They haven't passed all the inspections yet because they do have a certain amount of particulate that goes through, and that's the only regard that they fail being permitted. But another advantage too, especially in areas of the desert where there's not a lot of wood available, it uses stick-size fuel, and through running your system, you'd burn about 1/10 of the wood that you would using a traditional potbelly stove for the same heat return.
Wow, cool. Cool. So in talking about Sundog School of Natural Building, you guys have an apprenticeship program. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. The apprenticeship lasts 3 months, and it's the program that I did, and I'd highly recommend it to anybody. It was a big life-changing experience for me. And from that time that you get there, we're instantly teaching you about natural building. In the past, we've run 2 9-day build workshops where we work on cottages or other structures. This year, I think we're only going to do one, but the apprentices are the ones that actually get to design the structure, which is something that's kind of unique about our school. Whenever you show up to a build, the design is usually predetermined. And one thing that I really appreciate our school is that we allow our students to design the building themselves. And then we'll have a 9-day workshop, bring in a crew, get all the hands we need, and do the building there. This year's program is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be, I think, a really, really beneficial program for who's ever interested. We have quite a few buildings on the property that have not been fully finished, just from time constraints and weather constraints and all that kind of thing. Yeah. So this year, from pretty much the first day people get there, they're going to have their hands in the mud, and they're going to be working with natural materials, finishing floors in the building, doing earth and plasters, doing finished plasters. It's going to be a really banner year to be at the school. There's going to be a lot to be learned.
Nice. How exciting is that? So if somebody wants to find out about that program, where do they find it at?
You can find us at our website at sundogbuilders.net. The email is info@sundogbuilders.net. And then we also have a Facebook page as well, Sundog School of Natural Building. You can contact us through that as well.
Perfect. So I'd like for you to talk about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you might have learned from it.
I think my biggest failure, and a very common failure for a lot of people, is just learning the design process. When I started my apprenticeship, the first week I was there, I was still relatively new to even what natural building was. I didn't have an extensive knowledge of this before I went in, and I had read a book and made the split decision to just go do it. So when I got there, the first thing my buddy told me to do, my now business partner, he told me to design a building. So I sat down and over a couple of days designed a building. And by conventional construction standards, it was a fairly small building. It was about 800 square feet. And he's like, it looks good, but make it smaller. So I went through and redid my design. And I think it came out to about 625 square feet. And he looked at the drawing and said, good, now make it smaller.
Make it smaller.
And by the time I had finished, my design had completely changed to a small 2-story building that had 150 square feet with a 75 square foot footprint. And
wow,
that's very, very valuable to build small. First of all, I spend most of my time outdoors. The only time I'm indoors is to go to sleep at night.
Right.
So I realized that I don't need a lot of space inside because I don't do anything inside. So it helped me look at my living circumstances, and the great thing about natural building and building your own home is you custom build to your needs. And I gained an understanding of what my true needs were. And the second thing is that a lot of people, when they get interested in cob and get all excited, they may go do a workshop and be like, yeah, I'm going to do this at home. And then they go and they get started, and they realize that they all of a sudden don't have the 20 people there that were at the workshop. And while it's something that everybody can do, from kids to seniors, it's very labor intensive. So I think the statistic is that over 80% of cob buildings of the United States that exist are unfinished, because people will start large projects and find out how completely overwhelming it's become and give up. So it's really, really changed my perspective on design. I've never had any catastrophic building things that would, that just resulted in, terrible, terrible failures. But my design issue was something that really needed to be tweaked and molded, and just my understanding of the material and what went into it. Yeah. So, and it's progressed quite a lot.
Cool. So what do you consider your biggest success?
I consider the entire process that I've gone through a success. And it's what I've come to really love about teaching. Don't get me wrong. I'm a builder first and foremost. I also do woodworking, and I love to build. And when I first, the main appealing thing to me when I first started building was the cost. It's very, very cheap to make these buildings. I don't think we've ever spent more than $2,000 on building one of the cottages that we built on site.
Wow.
And that was the thing that hooked me, because I've always been poor. I will probably always be poor. So the cost-effective thing was what really got me. But that changed very, very quickly when I saw the community that was involved and really became a part of what a lot of people who are interested in this consider kind of a mystical world. Mm-hmm. And it's what I really, really have come to enjoy now is not what I'm teaching people to do with their hands, but how they can now see the world in a different way and realize that if they have a dream, that they can do it, and giving them the confidence in themselves to be able to do it. We're so often told that we need a specialist to do everything for us, that we're incapable of doing things for ourselves. Yeah. And that's just not true. Yeah. Sure, there's some things like some really good key points for, creating a successful building and not putting yourself in danger. But, through the workshops, we basically just sell a permission slip. We give people the confidence to go out and do what they could have already done. Yeah. And that's something really powerful in a time where a lot of people feel kind of helpless to their circumstance. And the world can sometimes seem very bleak and unable to separate ourselves from the things that we see inherently wrong with the way our society is running. Yeah. This gives people an outlet and a sense of pride and security in themselves to know that they can do whatever they set out to do. That was also my big takeaway from my time in Turtle Island. While it wasn't a great experience to see somebody who, through endless amounts of hard work and sacrifice, had gone out and made their dream possible, no matter how many people told them they couldn't, has been one of the most important lessons I've ever received. Because the reality is I grew up in the suburbs. Mm-hmm. Even when I talk about what I do with my friends, they're glad that I'm happy, but they can't even begin to really understand why I do what I do. Yeah. And so in a world where everyone's telling you can't, and being able to erase that and say, you absolutely can. All you need is the determination and the will to do it. That's what I love most about it.
Yeah. Yeah. What drives you?
That very fact, to me anyways, things can seem sometimes very, very bleak when you look at the world from a broad perspective. And I have no delusions of grandeur. I don't think in any way, shape, or form I will change the world. But I do very strongly believe that I can set an example where someone in future generations will come along and pick up where I left off and do something really dramatic in the world. And I think that's one of our huge problems as a society in general, is our short-sightedness. We have to have the capability to look beyond our own lives and see what comes next. Because I personally don't have any children, but maybe one day I will. And I want to leave the best world possible. Yeah. And I really believe that a lifetime of hard work and of doing this type of thing has the ability to give future generations the tools they need to move forward. Yeah.
That's a big part of why I do what I do. So I'm all about education, and I have to know what one book has been influential for you in this process in your life.
I'd have to say the big one would have to be The Hand Sculpted House. It's, like I said, it's been kind of the go-to book, the Bible for an introduction into natural building, and I highly recommend anyone who's interested to check it out. There are some things in there that are kind of now obsolete. I think the book needs to be updated, but just as a general resource and the philosophy behind it, as well as the practical application of it, if I were to pick a book on cob, it would have to be The Hand Sculpted House.
Perfect. What one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
If you have an interest, get out in your backyard and do it. You know, that the biggest thing is, you know, like I said, people feel like they need somebody say so in order to try this and do it, to make sure they're doing it right. And I'm giving everyone a permission slip right now. Go out and experiment. You'll figure out, you'll work your way out through it. You know, modern education system teaches us to memorize and repeat. You know, you have to reactivate your critical thinking and your analytical thinking, but everyone out there is completely capable of doing this. Our ancestors thousands of years ago were doing this. It is in our DNA to do this. So go out and practice, build small, start with a small project. Bread ovens are a really, you know, good little side project to start on. You can do it in your backyard, and then you get the byproduct of fresh bread and fresh pizza whenever you want it. And it's that's something that everyone just kind of gravitates toward. And it's not a time-consuming project. You can do it in a week. And there's several resources on the internet, you know, videos that will kind of walk you through it and teach you a little bit about the process. But, you know, if this is something that you're interested in, don't let it stop you. You know, sometimes at the school, people will come in, they've been saying, oh, you know, I've been dreaming about this for years. I've been, you know, researching it and looking at pictures, and, you know, don't wait. You know, life is short. You never know what's going to happen. And if it's something that you want to do and it's something that you're interested in, just go out and do it. Try, experiment, fail. You learn your best lessons from your failures. Don't be afraid to fail. And just have faith in yourself and your ability to try something new. Yeah,
beautiful. You have our permission.
Absolutely. Go out and build.
So thank you so much for joining us on the show today and sharing your experience with us, Brandon. It's been a treat getting to chat with you.
Thank you for having me. I really had a good time with it.
Yeah. So people can find the website again for the school is
sundogbuilders.net.
And to get a hold of you?
Me personally, I guess you can find me on Facebook. My name is Brandon Peterman, and I'm here in Prescott, Arizona. So if you'd like to contact me directly, feel free to shoot me a message, and we'll connect. I can answer some questions you may have.
Perfect. And we will have a link, urbanfarm.org/natural build. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. Decades ago, I started growing food in my front and backyard, and I realized that my mission in life is to inspire and empower others to grow their own nutrient-dense, healthy organic food. Because of this, a lot of people have come to me with their gardening questions over the years, and that got me thinking, what if we put together a community that would help budding gardeners blossom? So I finally made the idea a reality with my Urban Farm U member program. Each month, your membership includes 3 live online events, a monthly class, a chit-chat with an expert, and a monthly coaching session, plus access to the experts on our member page and a significant discount on our signature courses. I'm deeply committed to transforming our global food system, and I do this by empowering you to grow your own food. The Urban Farm membership program is a simple way to get going. Please join me in transforming your food system today. To learn more, go to urbanfarmmembership.org or text membership to 33444. That's urbanfarmmembership.org or text membership to 33444.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.